And again, for those just joining, we're just going to wait a couple of minutes for others to join. So just bear with us. Okay, I think we can get started now. There's still a couple of people just entering into the session, but we'll kick off anyway. So thank you so much, everyone, for joining us on this webinar to talk about Copilot for M365 and what we're seeing in the market and adoption techniques. So just a little bit of housekeeping. We are recording this session, so if you don't like being recorded, please drop off now. And as I've mentioned, it's being recorded, so we can share afterwards as well anyway. We do want to keep this a nice interactive open session. It is a panel discussion, so I have some questions for the panelists, but please feel free to ask any questions in the chat box. I'll be monitoring that throughout. So yeah, if you've got any burning questions or something sort of triggers a question whilst the panelists are talking, please put your questions in. Don't be shy. So the more interactive it is, the better for everyone. Yeah, so I think before we get started, I just want to sort of understand from the audience, and if you could put this in the chat, are you using Copilot at the moment? So if you could just put that in the chat, either yes or more information, that would be fantastic. And while we're doing that, we'll just do some introductions. So as I said, I'm the host for today, Wesley Budd, Strategic Partner Manager for Symity. With me, we have Jamie, if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Yes, hi everyone. So I'm Chief Architect for Symity. So I sit across all of our various different Microsoft products and solutions and spend a lot of time working with customers, working with Microsoft to make sure that we're addressing the business need and challenges that all of our customers are seeing at the moment.
Thank you, Jamie. Christina?
Hello, everyone. My name is Christina Chen, CEO of AI First Talent. We provide Copilot adoption managers to enterprises and to Microsoft partners. We do that through a very structured development program where we scout people, train them up together with Microsoft trainers. We provide them matched to your industry and a company culture, so they integrate into your team. We work quite closely with Symity to give you not only the expertise of Copilot, but also the horsepower needed to drive proper adoption on the ground, and also in a very cost-effective manner. That's us.
Thank you. And finally, Raki?
Good afternoon. I'm so excited to see so many of you join us today. I am Raki Sachdeva, and I'm the modern work lead for central government based in Microsoft UK. I work across most of our central government customers on how do we do ethical adoption of generative AI to ensure that government departments can benefit from it by making sure they are compliant and doing it correctly. So that's me.
Excellent. Thank you so much. And you'll be pleased to know that this is the final slide that I'll be sharing. So I'll stop sharing now. And we can get into the discussion points. And again, just want to reiterate, please ask any questions that you have in the chat. I want to keep this as interactive as possible. So I guess, the first stage that we need to look at here is just overall, what is Copilot for M365 and how is it affecting people at work? Raki, over to you.
Right. Sorry, I was figuring out how to unmute myself, but thank you, Wesley. I think it's really important that we set the scene to make sure everybody is on the same page. So before I talk about what is Copilot for Microsoft 365, I'll take you a little bit on a journey in terms of why Microsoft invested in something called Copilot for Microsoft 365. So if you have heard of Microsoft, I'm sure in the last year or so, you have heard of Copilot because now we have literally Copilot for everything. But Copilot for Microsoft 365 is bringing AI into the applications people use on a day-to-day basis. I'll talk a little bit about it, but it was first launched in February 2023, so more than a year back. And the reason Microsoft decided to make this massive investment in generative AI is to really help us solve this problem of digital debt. And digital debt is nothing but something we all are experiencing on a day-to-day basis with the number of emails that we receive, the number of meetings that we have in our diaries, the number of notifications that we get on a daily basis. And all of these combined has made it easier than ever to communicate, but harder than ever to keep up. I personally struggle with kind of keeping up with the number of meetings, number of kind of, number of things that I have to go to on a daily basis. And the statistics that Microsoft kind of do research tells us very similar story. The number of meetings per week, if we look at kind of since pandemic, has increased by 153% globally, which means people are going into more and more meetings, and there is no indication that this trend is any which ways getting reversed, which means that the pace of work is intensifying. People are working from home, but at the same time, everything feels so important. People are struggling to make sure that their work days are not just full of meetings. And as Microsoft, we publish a work trend index. That's a study that is being done globally across 30,000 customers around 30 different countries. And that study tells us that nearly 2 in 3 people are saying that we are struggling with having the time and energy to be able to do our jobs. And people are struggling to find information, people are struggling with communication, which is really causing a massive problem for organizations, which means that people are spending less and less time innovating. People have less time to be creative and to really help organizations become innovative or do things differently. Hence, Copilot for Microsoft 365 was sort of introduced as the productivity tool that can help people to tackle that information overload. And how it does it is by giving everybody an AI assistant across the Office applications that people use on a daily basis. So we all are familiar with Word, Excel, PowerPoint, Outlook, because we all use these applications on a day-to-day basis. Now, what Copilot for Microsoft 365 does is that integrates with Microsoft 365 applications, all of these applications, to help enhance productivity and creativity. So whether you are a CEO or whether you are an individual contributor, it's giving everybody an assistant, whether you qualify for having an executive assistant or not, and it gives you the ability to be able to summarize your documents, to be able to draft your emails, to be able to give you that first hand in generating content. And when it comes to information search, provide you insight based on your own needs, your own kind of interaction across Microsoft 365 graph so that you can navigate through the information and your workday more efficiently. So in a nutshell, that is what Microsoft 365, Copilot for Microsoft 365 does. But I'm sure as we go through, we can answer more questions, which would be more specific.
Yeah, fantastic. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, totally with that. AI assistant, it's your own personal assistant. Fantastic explanation there. Thank you. And I guess there's a lot. There's been a lot of information and people talking about Copilot throughout the last year. So I guess Christina, from your point of view, what are you seeing in the market with Copilot? How is it being not necessarily adopted, but viewed and maybe adopted as well? What are you seeing?
Very interesting question. There's definitely a lot of movement in the market. If I were to summarize this current state of adoption, I'd say usage of Copilot among different businesses, I would use disparity actually, because even though this has only been out for a few months, right, it's a relatively new tool, we're starting to see already some of the front runners creating a bit of a lead, a bit of a gap to everyone else who is also, everyone's working on this. And this is not just around the time, starting time of when you started, because some of the companies have been in early access program, etc. But even the companies who have started at the same time, we have seen quite different approaches, and we can talk about some of that in detail later on. Some of different approaches, best practices, etc., that allow them to get better metrics, get better ROIs, and that's quite interesting to see in a fairly short space of time. But just on a more positive note, though, we all know that Copilot or AI strategy is not a sprint; it's a long run. So there is still time to catch up, and that's why we create these kind of webinars and discussions like this, so we can all share best practices and lessons learned.
Yeah, and from a recruitment standpoint, I guess where are people, where are organizations with that side of things? Are there enough people out there? What's happening?
Oh, interesting question, Wes. So no, it's the short answer. Not enough skill set, not enough capabilities, not enough resources, and this is, I'm sure that every part of the sort of ecosystem is working towards creating more skill set. Microsoft's putting out certifications, trainers, etc. And we play our part in at scale using very structured programs to create more of these resources, adoption managers, adoption specialists, to go into the ecosystem to help companies adopt, because it is quite resource intensive in a way. It's not just flipping on a switch. And Jamie, you would know there's a lot of with live projects going on. It's not just flipping on. Even the technical readiness piece is very granular. You don't want to miss. It's very important areas. And there's a whole user enablement piece, which is on the ground, requires on the ground grassroots adoption rather than just top down communications. So we see a lot of companies reaching out for resources. Yes.
Excellent. And to you, Jamie, I guess same sort of question really, in terms of what you're seeing in the market with Copilot from a Symity perspective.
Yeah, so it's really interesting. So I'd echo a lot of the things that Christina's just been talking about. There's definitely a huge buzz at the moment about Copilot, but about generative AI generally, and the power that it's going to bring to the workplace. I think though that when we're talking to customers, what I tend to see is that a lot of customers are struggling to understand, outside of this hype, well, okay, what is it actually going to deliver for me, and how do I get best use out of it, and how do I empower my workforce to understand what this is capable of. I think it's a bit of a sea change inflection point in terms of technology in society, really. How we interact with Gen AI and with Copilot as a tool is very different to how we've used technology previously. It used to be that we get a new piece of technology or a new application. It'd be like, oh, okay, well, this app, you press these buttons to do these things, and we're all used to pressing buttons in apps and clicking menus, because that's how we've interacted with technology for 20 years. Copilot and Gen AI require us to actually interact completely differently. It's now much more freeform. We've got to ask questions. We've got to generate prompts. It's much more like Raki talked about an assistant, an AI assistant. I commonly refer to it as working with an intern in your team. You need to treat it the same way that you would an intern. You need to give it clear instructions. You need to be concise. You need to be very specific about what your expectations are to get the best results. And I definitely see organizations struggling with working out how to get their employees those new skills that are required, you know, shifting them from pressing buttons in applications to critical analytical thinking around how to generate a request, how to interrogate and look at the information that's provided back, how to generate questions that aren't gonna introduce bias or those kind of things. It's definitely a shift in terms of skill set that employees need to go on, and that's definitely a challenge. I think the other area where we see concern is around the preparedness of an organization to start using these tools. There's definitely concern around okay, if I just turn this on and everybody can access and search for things like, what is there in my organization that I don't know about that's going to suddenly get surfaced? You know, that the stereotypical example is everybody going to be able to find that file in the HR department with everybody's salaries in it? How do I make sure that's not happening? How do I deal with things like sensitive data and intellectual property? And so there's all of these concerns about this, because it is going to introduce a completely different set of tools and capabilities. So spend lots of time talking to organizations about pretty much those two things: how to get your environment ready and leverage the best of it, and introduce Copilot in a way that you're limiting some of those risks. Absolutely doable. At the same time, how do I manage adoption? How do I get people trained? How do I get them thinking about using this tool in the correct way so that they're getting the best results?
Awesome. And Raki, would you echo any of that?
Yeah, I think I'm going to echo everything that you've said, Jamie, because the most important thing for every organization is to think about is, when we are talking about generative AI, specifically Copilot for Microsoft 365, this is a whole new way of working that involves both software as well as culture. So I see a lot of organizations, and especially as they were embarking on pilots, POCs, MVPs, whatever you want to call it, there was so much focus on making sure, like Jamie said, are we technically ready? People were concerned about the ethics, people were concerned about the compliance, people were really concerned about kind of, is it going to expose our CEO's salary or our minister's salary, because they don't want it. But what is really important is, and I'll touch base on three things, which I think, learning from working with customers who have been on this journey with us slightly longer in the early access program, is first and foremost, you have to think about developing your leadership capabilities. And leadership is the number one thing, to make sure that your leadership has the understanding, your leadership team are able to envision how to leverage generative AI for business outcomes, because you need to ensure right from the beginning you are creating a business strategy, you are defining how it's really going to drive a business value, both in terms of tangible and non-tangible benefits, so that you can provide clarity, you can prioritize your pilots based on that. So that's number one, bringing leadership on board. Number two is, this is a human change, and you can only manage a human change or a human transformation through robust user enablement programs. And I have seen organizations underestimating it. I have seen organizations really paying value to it. And I see organizations who have not underestimated it making far more progress than any other organizations. So investing that time in the employee experience, creating a robust feedback flywheel almost, to make sure that you are constantly understanding, is it actually adding value to the people? Because it might not be one size fits all, or it might not be the thing for everybody, but making sure that you are getting a pulse of your people and driving that human change through very similar enablement programs that you might have done for other digital tools is very important. And number three is like what Jamie was saying, that technical readiness, making sure that you as an organization are thinking about, do we have to have everything in one place or everything ready before we get started? Or is there a starting point? And in parallel, we can build on that, creating that optimized experience by working with our partners, by working with the Microsoft team to make sure that we are technically ready. And the answer to this is that there is a fine balance. You need to make sure that obviously you have your you do your DPIAs, you do your impact assessments to get ready, but at the same time, you don't really need to have everything or all the answers before you get started. And with that, it comes kind of, how you do your data lifecycle management or how you manage your records. You can build on these programs as you get started in parallel. So if kind of you are thinking about 3 pillars, I would make sure that you are thinking about all these things. And just one learning, if I can quickly add, Wes, which I have seen from some of our early adopters, is getting your people with special needs, your accessibility user base on board. Because what you don't want to do is ignore that 1 billion people who represent our workforce, which is almost 18% in the UK. I was quite surprised by the stat. So you want to make sure that when you are creating a technology or reimagining your workforce, you are doing it by bringing these people on board, because you would be surprised how much value it will add to people who are dyslexic, who are neurodiverse, or who really struggle with that overload of information, and how it can create that level playing field across your organization.
Amazing, great insights. Thank you so much. There was a couple of things that touched upon there, and it's about sort of like the data and what's going on. So got a good question in the Q&A from, excuse me if I don't get this quite right, Psycat. How do you ensure that enterprise data fed into Copilot is not used publicly for training the LLMs behind the scene? In short, how do you ensure enterprise data remains within enterprise boundaries? Jamie, I think I'll put that to you. And then obviously everyone chip in, please.
Yeah, it's a really good question, and it's a common one that I get from lots of different customers. And I think the thing to be really clear about up front is that Microsoft have made some really big public statements around the fact that none of the company like enterprise data that belongs to the customer organizations is used in any way to train the large language model. So there's quite a good diagram online. It's worth googling it for that looks at the Copilot architecture and the timeline of how data is treated and what happens when you put a prompt into Copilot. There's some lots of the grounding and of that prompt and the rationalization of that prompt actually all sits within something called the semantic index within your tenant, and that data always stays within your M365 tenant. The prompt itself will get passed out into the Copilot engine to generate the results, but actually your data stays within that semantic index and within the bounds of your Microsoft 365 tenant. And it doesn't leave that. So definitely go and have a look at that that collateral online. Maybe we'll send a link out to some of that stuff following the session, but it's worth reviewing that. I think the other thing that's worth looking at is the responsible AI framework that Microsoft have put together. They've got a really solid framework about their approach to AI, their approach to responsibility, to using it responsibility. And that's also worth a read, because that will give you a really good view on Microsoft's approach to implementing these technologies, to doing it in a way that safeguards personal data, and also make sure it's being used sensibly, that it's not being used for malicious purposes, that it's protecting individuals' privacy and those kind of things. So again, another good document to go and have a read of.
And if I can quickly add, literally what you said, Jamie, whilst Copilot for Microsoft 365 is a new offering, and it's almost kind of new service that we are providing to our customers, but it is worth keeping this in mind, that Copilot builds on and it applies on your existing privacy, security, and compliance commitments. And if you are a Microsoft 365 customer, you already have those privacy, those security, and compliance commitments in place because you've signed up to Microsoft 365 services, which means that it is going to abide by the same principles. But also, like Jamie said, we are very clear when kind of, we publish the approach and the view on how Copilot for Microsoft 365 is built. It only has access to the content that your user should already have access to. And it's managed with same set of tools, same set of standards that you use today. So kind of reiterating the same thing that Jamie said, but the data is not used to train the OpenAI foundation models without your permission. Your data is protected by the most comprehensive compliance and security controls, which are already in place on your tenant if you are a customer. So it's worth going back and revisiting the terms and conditions to make sure that you are happy. And like Jamie said, we have got these architecture diagrams, we have got these informations that are publicly published to make sure that our customers are satisfied on security, compliance, and the ethos of all of it being responsible AI.
Yeah. One of the things we commonly talk to customers about doing alongside your Copilot adoption is just doing a bit of a health check and a sanity check of your environment to make sure that you're getting the most out of all of the fantastic security tools and data compliance tools that Microsoft have available. And we can do that in parallel to the deployment of Copilot. So it's worth looking at that because you've got a great set of tools and capabilities within the Microsoft portfolio to manage that data, to manage that securely, and make sure that you know what you've got and where it is and how it's being stored and how it's being used. As Raki said, Copilot runs in the context of the user that's typing the prompt. So if you as a user don't have access to the data, neither will Copilot. But you do have to have that baseline security set up properly in the first place to get the most out of it.
Just to add on and point to a specific tool, a lot of people are looking and leveraging Purview, Microsoft Purview, for some of these compliance and security and privacy frameworks and discovery tools. And it's a complex tool that's not only for Copilot, it's for the whole Microsoft ecosystem. We actually just created a guide, a quick reference kind of visual guide as to which part of Purview will be suitable here for Copilot. If it's useful for anyone, put your hand up or say me in the chat, and we'll just make sure we get it to a guide to people.
Awesome, thank you. And yeah, so Kat, I'll come back to your other question shortly, but another good question coming from Mark. Every organization, and this will open up a big discussion point, every organization is different and their Copilot adoption approach should be tailored. However, are there any rules you'd suggest or approaches which consistently work well? For example, should organizations generally start with a small targeted use case to prove value, or seek broad brush applications and wait to see how users begin to use it? Who would like to?
I can start, and then obviously I think it would be great for you guys to chip in. So you're absolutely right. There's no one size fits all. We have about 600 customers globally using Copilot for Microsoft 365, and all of them have embarked on kind of their respective pilots very differently. Couple of learnings, if I may share. One thing you want to ensure that when you are doing a pilot, it's not a digital-led pilot. Whilst you want to make sure that your IT teams and your digital teams are part of it, but because it's redefining business processes and it's redefining how people do their jobs, you want to make sure that you are including those business users in the pilot. So that's number one. Number two, I think a good way to figure out who could be a potential quick win would be going through the Microsoft 365 Admin Center, and there are reporting, which I'm sure Wes you can share on the chat, which is available to you as admin to see who's spending a lot of time on emails, who's spending a lot of time collaborating when it comes to documents. And that gives you a really good view of these could be our top 10 or top 20 or top 100 people who could really benefit and get those quick wins from Copilot. So kind of keeping it analytical and basing it on data science and making sure that these people are definitely included because they will see the instant benefit. The The other thing that I have seen a lot of departments do is to offer an expression of interest. Generative AI is such a buzzword, and people, and I'm not sure if anybody has got chance to review the work trend index that we have published recently, but it is talking about whether organizations are ready to embrace generative AI or not, but people are ready to use generative AI, which means that organizations need to start thinking about shadow AI, which almost is a new term, I feel, but people are ready to invest their own money or invest their own kind of, into using generative AI capabilities because they are using it in their personal lives. So you want to make sure that people who are really excited about the potential of these technologies are part of your pilot program. I've seen a lot of departments sending out an expression of interest so that they can get people who are really keen on transforming their organizations using generative AI and then cherry picking how many you can get. And the final thing I'll say is when you are starting on this journey, the best advice I have for you is start simple, because this is still a new technology. And if you get too fixated on making sure that you are driving departmental value from day one, which means that you want to make sure that it's really going to change how you do things, or it's going to drive that cross-pollination of ideas, and it's going to automate your cross-business process flows, I would say hold on. You need to make sure that people, you are starting with that individual value, which is the quick wins I talked about. Kind of people are able to master those basic prompts. People are able to see value in that summarization and meeting notes generation, then move into departmental value, and then move into organizational value. So start with those simple use cases that have impact across workflows and that has a stickiness across your organization. And then you move into a bit more role-based processes and extend usage to it, and then you move into those advanced ones. Those would be my few tips, which hopefully would help you get started with a bang.
Yeah, I definitely echo some of that stuff, Raki, especially starting with the low hanging fruit. Those basic productivity use cases like meeting summaries and document creation and those kind of things, searching for data. We see it's really important to get everybody onto almost like a level playing field in terms of understanding what generative AI is and how to get the best out of it before you move on to those more business specific use cases or line of business optimization type stuff. Like personally, from my perspective, I've got probably a number of different do's and maybe just one don't when we're looking at Copilot adoption. I think it's really important to generate some kind of community within your organization and some internal dialogue about how people are using the tool. If you can get people sharing hints and tips and advice, I think I mentioned Prompt Buddy, which is the Microsoft app that allows you to build like an internal knowledge base around prompts and things that have worked well for different users, share them, vote on them. That's really, really valuable. It really helps. The other thing that I think is probably worth doing is when you're looking at adoption, don't look at it as a single point in time moment where you need to just go out there, train everybody for a week, and then they'll know it and they'll move on. What we're trying to do here, or what you should be trying to do here with generative AI, is change ways of working and habits. And that doesn't happen overnight. It does take consistent application of these messages. So you should probably be planning to drip feed this stuff out into your business across these lines of business, be reinforcing that message over 6, 8, 12 weeks through your various different adoption sprints to make sure that people are actually making that change rather than just reverting to old ways of working. That's really, really important. I think making sure that you've got all this best practice in place, that you've got a team of people that understand how to get the most value out of Copilot and Gen AI in general is really important too. And that kind of leads on to the one don't that I'd tentatively push out there. it's really tempting just to go out and buy half a dozen licenses, give them to the people in IT, and just let them have a play. Talking to customers, the feedback I get from customers that have gone that route is that they struggle to really get to grips with the value of Copilot, because they don't know what they don't know. They don't know how to get the best out of the tool. They don't know the new ways of working. They don't know how to structure a prompt properly to get the right good quality content returned back from Copilot. And it really slows down the adoption for those organizations, because they tentatively like tip their toe in the water with that kind of like, well, I'm just going to buy a few licenses and see how it goes. And the result isn't necessarily that transformational. It's, you know, it's a bit, yeah, it's somewhere in the middle. And then they go, well, okay, this is a fairly expensive tool. I'm not sure I'm seeing the value from it. The organizations that I see who are able to generate real transformation here and are amazed by the capabilities are the ones that double down on a proper training and adoption program, and working with Microsoft or working with partners that have the expertise to guide them through this business change. Because much more than a technology change, this is a business change initiative. It's not about the tech, it's about changing ways of working.
Awesome. Christina, did you have something to add?
Yes, well, actually, just piggyback on that. What we've seen is the sooner you can reach critical mass, the more successful you'll be with the adoption and with the rollout of Copilot. And critical mass can be done at a team level, department level, location level first. But that critical mass is important for the adoption to stick as well. Because, just speaking with even some of you who in the last couple of weeks and working, one of the energy companies that we were speaking with mentioned the usage is great to start with, training, etc., and then drops off very quickly. And how do you keep that habit, change that habit over time, is actually by having critical mass of that small, whether that's team, department, etc. And some of the use cases we've seen, success stories, is where they've invested resources or convert existing team members into really embedded into, on the floor, walking the floor, sitting next to them. Hey, did you know you can use your PowerPoint this way? Or, switching on your Copilot in the meetings, etc. That has to be happening day to day. And that's something we've definitely seen working very well. And just one last point about best success best practice is we cannot overestimate the value of building use cases and building very specific use cases by role, by department. I know there's a lot of in the adoption kit, there's a lot of day in the life, etc. Let me give a real example. A financial services company. They are M&A advisory firm, so you can imagine bankers working 18-hour days, right? So they almost don't have time to save themselves time. You see what I mean? They're already at capacity. They don't have time to train and change and think about different things to save their 18 hours a day. So what the solution was then for them, it works really well, is actually building some very simple use cases. Let's take example of Teams, right? Teams Copilot runs transcription. You can have meeting recaps, list of actions, very simple. You would think that's the low-hanging fruit for them, but because it had a missing gap, the meeting notes, they have very specific meeting updates kind of template for their clients. Every time they want weekly project recaps, they have these big meetings, lots of actions, etc. But that doesn't fit into their template. So that had just never quite made it into their workflow. But by just very simple example, having the training on how to do that, or just making a specific PowerPoint template that actually takes the the transcription and the recap from the meeting, allow them to build this very small specific use case that what saves at least half an hour, right? For every meeting, project weekly meeting, multiply that by a few hundred bankers, right? Think about the ROI. And yes, it's been covered in trainings, but just reiterating almost that specific use case building and feeding that back to the business is what we've seen working really well tactically on the ground.
Awesome, really good point there raised. So another interesting question coming from Sophie. How would you implement Copilot in a way that addresses and alleviates concerns about job redundancies? Christina, so, let's start with you. Oh, sorry, unless
No, go on.
Yes, it's all about, it's a fine line, it's a communication. Well, there's, I think, the top down and the grass bottom up, right? So the top down, obviously, when we talked at the beginning, you know, the leadership understanding of this and how that's communicated, and how I like Jamie's example of having an intern or Raki's example of having an assistant. It's about the human sort of touch approach. Again, that works really well in organizations we've seen with the grassroots is your colleague who's sitting next to you that you've worked with many times. Say, hey, did you know this is actually saves you, half an hour, half a day or whatnot doing so, tapping on the shoulders. That's the type of dynamic we've seen very well in terms of cultural transformation or business transformation or just getting people more at ease with using the technology. Is companies who had that kind of grassroots movement dynamic going on. Yeah,
sure. Raki?
Yeah, I think it's that creating that awareness. If anybody is familiar with that ADKAR framework, which is quite an important framework for driving any change in organization, the first point is awareness. It's making sure that people are aware of what it is versus what it doesn't. And I know if you watch a lot of movies, where movies like Terminator, it almost gives you that view of generative AI here is to take over the world. And our recent studies also show that while 60% of people are optimistic about using generative AI, there is still 40% of skepticism, which means people are concerned that it's going to take over their jobs. And there is even more and more concern with almost that early in career, because I've got this classic example. I was with a law firm a couple of weeks back, and their first and second year associates, their main job is to make sure that they prepare briefing documents for their fourth and fifth year associates so that they can go and do these presentations and meetings with potential clients. Now, we know that generative AI has an ability to really create those drafts, do that research, and almost replicate the work of those first and second year associates. So this conversation with law firm which tells us we don't really need first and second year associates, but then how would you build up those fourth and fifth year associates who are going to drive that business for you? How will you build that pipeline? Which really means that you need to think about how your fourth and fifth year associates now coach your first and second year associates does need to shift, which means that first and second year associate doesn't only need to create those drafts or write those briefing documents, but they can actually do something more that can drive that transformation or do something that can help you closing that opportunity much more quickly. So like Christina said, it's redefining how you do things currently, which will take time. And to get rid of that skepticism, you need to make sure your leadership is on board, who's driving that awareness with you. And one thing I tell all my customers is, whilst we want to make sure that you are leveraging the productivity benefits that we have talked about, but we know there is a potential cost associated to it. But if you are a Microsoft 365 customer, you can start with Copilot, which I'm sure a lot of people might have heard about. It's Bing Chat Enterprise, it used to be known as. It comes with commercial data protection. Wesley will post the link in the chat, but it gives you that starting point for every organization free of charge to get started on your journey to generative AI and to really lower that skepticism. Because once people will start interacting with generative AI, they will start to understand how those prompt-based interactions are helping them. They will understand how much more of their own unique people skills, human skills that they need to build to make sure they have a place in the organization. So it is going to almost restructure the economy, and especially the job economy, but it is going to create tons of opportunities, and it's going to create a lot of kind of focus on those emotional intelligence, that people skills, that are really, really far more valuable than anything that generative AI can bring. And if I can put some stats to it, we've done a survey with LinkedIn where 72% of executives have voted that soft skills are going to be more valuable than AI skills. So it really tells that people have a chance and have an opportunity to hone on those people skills as they work with generative AI.
Yeah, I think that's really key, and it's almost worth, when we're getting those challenges from customers, it's almost worth going back and level setting about, well, okay, why are we doing this in the first place? We're doing this in the first place because you're all too busy. You're all too busy doing things that aren't adding any value. Going to meetings, finding data, summarizing stuff like this doesn't actually help you be creative and do the important stuff around your job. It's just stuff that you have to get through. So I think it's really good when you're starting these initiatives. Communication is so important, and setting awareness about why we're doing this as an organization and what the value is, and level setting around the fact that that this isn't about redundancies. This is about giving you the time back to enable you to do the job you should be doing already but can't because you're just too busy doing the minutiae, like the mundane, just that basic day-to-day office stuff. It's trying to free you up. And I think the other thing that's worth reminding people here, or it's a very cheesy phrase, but this is Copilot, not autopilot. So Copilot can't and shouldn't be making you redundant because, like an intern, you wouldn't trust the document that an intern writes and just forward it straight on to a customer. We need people that have got intelligence and analytical skills to be able to review the content that Copilot's producing, to make sure that it's accurate, to make sure it's trustworthy, to make sure it's pulled data from the right places. We still need that in the workplace, and we'll always need that in the workplace. So yeah, for me, it's those two things. It's setting awareness, but it's also making sure people understand that yeah, definitely Copilot, not autopilot.
Yeah, and I think as well, it's one of those things that is designed to give you more time to be more creative. Yeah, to have that thinking time to develop those thoughts better rather than just reacting to it. Look, we have gone over time already. We did only have 45 minutes for this session. So just to sort of wrap up, from each of you, like, how do you add value to the people on this call? Christina, let's start with you.
Well, thanks everyone for your time. Hope you got something valuable out of this. We add value by providing the resources that's very scarce right now to help you run these Copilot rollouts, adoption programs very successfully. And we do that in a seamless way with partners you already trust, like Symity, right? So you already been working with Symity on Microsoft 365, other teams, etc. We do that by, in the background, providing these resources and being on those teams as well.
Thank you. And Jamie?
Yeah, so I'd encourage everybody here who's starting off on this Copilot journey to reach out, talk to Microsoft, talk to partners in this space like us, like Symity, who have some experience delivering this technology. Make the most out of those resources that you've got, and some of the different things that we've signposted to on this call, because they will really accelerate your adoption of this type of technology within the business. So if you're looking at Copilot and you want some of the advice and best practice and some of the thought leadership that we've talked about here today, reach out to us. You can find Symity online, on LinkedIn, etc. Here to help.
Thank you. And Raki?
I think I'm going to echo what everybody said, but please feel free to reach out. The first and foremost thing that everybody should take away from this conversation is that your job is to reduce AI anxiety in your organization. And the way you can do it is by talking to people who have been on the ground, like obviously Symity, Microsoft, who have been doing it with customers to make sure that your questions around compliance, your questions around data, and the visibility of data are being answered so that you are feeling quite confident as you move forward to drive that human change in your organizations.
Awesome, thank you so much. And as the panelists have said, please reach out on LinkedIn and connect with everyone. Yes, so it's been an absolute honor to host this session, and thank you everyone that joined, and thank you to the panelists as well. Thank you so much, some wonderful insights there. So yeah, let's connect beyond the call. So thank you again. Have a great day.
Thank you. Bye.
Cheers all. Bye.